Ambassador Zilvaya stepped off the transport shuttle, tentacles quivering with excitement. Today was the day, after endless cycles of negotiations, the humans had finally agreed to join the Galactic Federation. As the first Gelmin ambassador to be stationed on Earth, it was Zilvaya's honor to formally welcome humanity into the galactic community. The human diplomatic team was already assembled on the landing platform, ready to greet the new ambassador. Zilva wiggled its facial tendrils in the human gesture of greeting it had practiced many times. "Greetings, friends. I am Ambassador Zilvaya, and I am overjoyed to be here today, marking this momentous occasion of your people joining our federation." The human leader, Secretary of State Bradley, stepped forward to shake one of Zilvaya's tentacles. "On behalf of humanity, we are pleased to welcome you to Earth, Ambassador. We have prepared an orientation itinerary so you can learn more about human history and culture as you assume your diplomatic duties here." "Excellent. I am most eager to experience all that Earth has to offer," clicked Zilvaya enthusiastically. This was a profound honor to be the first Gelmin to truly understand the humans and help integrate them into the galactic community. It had immersed itself in all available information on humanity, but knew there was nothing like living among a new species to truly understand them. Zilvaya's first stop was a museum focusing on human history. Its guides explained this was an important first step in appreciating how humanity developed from small hunter-gatherer tribes into a spacefaring civilization. Eagerly, Zilvaya followed them inside, tendrils writhing in anticipation. The first exhibit covered early human history, like the development of agriculture, writing, and metalworking. All fascinating, but every species had analogous periods in their development. But as Zilvaya was led deeper into the museum, it realized this history tour took an unexpectedly dark turn. The next halls displayed vicious warfare, violent raids, and cruel tyrants ruthlessly conquering more and more territory. Zilvaya's facial tendrils quivered in dismay as gruesome torture devices were explained in horrifying detail. Why would the humans showcase such violence as a representative introduction to their history? Things only got worse as the exhibits moved through human history. More efficient weapons to slaughter each other by the thousands. Terrible diseases killing millions without cure or containment. Ruthless colonial expansion displacing or destroying indigenous cultures. Endless cycles of conflict, violence, and atrocity on massive scales. Zilvaya realized its tentacles were involuntarily retracting into its body, a Gelmin stress reflex. It tried to politely excuse himself from the museum tour, but Secretary Bradley urged him to continue. "I know it's not easy, Ambassador, but understanding the darkness in our past is necessary to fully appreciate who we are today." The guide solemnly escorted Zilvaya into a wing labeled World War II. The Gelmin ambassador couldn't even fathom what horrors awaited inside. But for the sake of its diplomatic mission, it resignedly followed. The next hours were a blur of bombs, guns, tanks, and flying machines of death, unleashing destruction beyond anything Zilvaya thought possible. Genocide, nuclear weapons, waves of fire incinerating cities full of civilians. The scale and efficiency of violence made Zilvaya's carapace ache in distress. Secretary Bradley laid a comforting hand on the traumatized Gelman's shoulder. "I know this is hard, but humanity learned important lessons from these nightmares." It prompted a consensus to build a better future. Zilvaya desperately hoped that was true as the tour continued to human history's more recent chapters. But the 20th century section hardly seemed any more peaceful. Cold wars, proxy conflicts, engineered coups, proliferating nuclear stockpiles, rampant disease, and environmental destruction. Zilvaya simply couldn't comprehend how humans could advance to space travel when they were so determined to slaughter themselves into oblivion. "Ambassador, are you all right?" Secretary Bradley asked with concern. Zilvaya quivered weakly. "Your species' past is just so overwhelmingly violent," he confessed nervously. "I do not understand how you survived long enough to progress." Secretary Bradley sighed. "It is truly a miracle when you look at our history. But by overcoming those dark chapters, I hope you see the strength of the human spirit, our will to dream of peace and find understanding between all peoples. That is why this Federation membership is so meaningful." Zilvaya perked up, buoyed by this new perspective. "Perhaps you are right, Secretary. Now then, I believe your itinerary has a cultural exhibit next. I am most eager to experience human artistic achievements in philosophy. Hopefully this violent species had more than just endless war to show for itself." Yet Zilvia quickly discovered human culture seemed bizarrely obsessed with graphic violence, crime, weapons, destruction, depravity, and death. Musical performances featured screaming rage or lurid sexuality. Popular movies endlessly depicted crime, murder, torture, cruel twists of fate. One particularly horrifying film, titled Saw, depicted elaborate machines trapping helpless victims into gruesome torture games for the amusement of others. It was considered entertainment here. Zilvia clenched its tentacles, body quivering. Secretary Bradley stood by patiently, as if this were all perfectly normal expressions of culture. Next was a gallery displaying important works of human visual art. Zilvia hoped desperately to see inspiring depictions of beauty and nobility. Surely, a species capable of space travel appreciated higher ideals. But canvas after canvas featured battle scenes, dying figures in agony, violent myths of severed heads, murder, cruelty, and human suffering depicted with disturbing obsessive detail. "Well, what do you think?" Secretary Bradley asked. Zilvia twitched its tentacles anxiously. "You have such a consistent fixation on suffering and death. I am unsure what to make of your species anymore, Secretary." Secretary Bradley patted Zilvia comfortingly with his disturbing hand appendages. "I know we must seem very alien and even monstrous after today's cultural survey, but there is kindness and compassion in humanity too, although it can be drowned out by darkness at times." He guided the Gelmin ambassador to a small side exhibit, a darkened room playing a video titled Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Zilvia nervously extended an eye stalk. But this video was gentle, reassuring, friendly, full of warmth and wisdom, but no violence. The human spoke slowly, his words welcoming Zilvia as of a light, like a friend instead of a bizarre alien creature. Zilvia slowly relaxed its clenched tentacles as Secretary Bradley gave it time to watch the full archive. Yes, perhaps humans were complex creatures, it mused, capable of both light and darkness to a degree Gelmin found scandalizing, with such wild emotional extremes. At last, Zilvia emerged back into the glaring lights of the cultural exhibit, facial tendrils finally relaxing from their strange rictus of anxiety. "Thank you for the orientation into your history and culture, Secretary Bradley. It was enlightening." Secretary Bradley smiled. "It is a lot to take in, I know, but understanding it will help you serve as ambassador. Now then, there is a reception this evening where you can meet many prominent humans." Zilvia quivered nervously, but reminded itself that enduring further culture shock was its duty. At the reception, he cautiously sampled exotic human foods like mini hot dogs, pizza rolls, and something called Doritos, intense flavors, like everything in human culture. The Gelmin ambassador mingled amidst the animated humans attending the reception. Their constant smiles were unnerving with all those aggressively flat teeth on display. Did they need to constantly prove their ability to bite? Better to nervously smile back, just in case. An important senator cornered Zilvia to enthusiastically explain American football as culturally invaluable for understanding humanity. The rules made no logical sense, but the senator kept emphasizing dramatic violence between players. Was this recreation or mock combat? The ambassador could not tell. Nearby, a knot of scientists described their cutting-edge research into creating miniature black holes. For energy needs, they assured. Zilvia politely nodded along, while wondering if humans understood the foolish risks they were taking. Even with good intentions, their species seemed drawn to reckless extremes. But Zilvia reminded itself that for all the darkness in humans, there was light too. Mr. Rogers' gentle wisdom echoed in its mind as the ambassador mingled intense yet hopeful optimism. This species was confusing, contradictory, and endlessly intense. But perhaps the Federation would ultimately help temper humanity's wild spirit. As the night wore on, Zilvia felt drained by strain of constantly adjusting to the humans' overwhelming everything. At last, it politely extracted itself from the chattering crowd's clinging glasses of intoxicating liquors. The ambassador longed for rest in the serene surroundings of its own embassy. Yet when Zilvia arrived at the new Gelmin embassy, a tense standoff was underway outside. Human protesters had blocked all entries, waving signs with angry slogans. Many signs depicted Ambassador Zilvia in crude drawings tied to stakes or riddled with primitive projectiles. Secretary Bradley rushed to explain. "My deepest apologies, Ambassador. These are fringe isolationist groups, protesting Galactic Federation membership. pay their threats no mind, your diplomatic immunity guarantees your protection. Xylovia stared in dismay at the braying mob, its exhausted mind recoiling at yet more proof of humanity's endless quarreling, threatening, illogical rage. After somehow surviving the trauma of the orientation tour, this vulgar intimidation was finally too much. Xylovia turned to Secretary Bradley with drooping tendrils. I must urgently retire and compose my thoughts in solitude. Thank you for everything, Secretary. Your species' overwhelming intensity of spirit surpasses all understanding. Not waiting for a reply, Ambassador Xylovia activated its anti-gravs and floated swiftly over the frenzied humans into the sanctuary of its embassy. Collapsing onto reclining cushions, it secreted calming oils over its quivering tentacles. Never had it felt so utterly overwhelmed as after this first stumbling encounter with humanity's unlimited potential for manic extremes. Yet a small part of Xylovia's mind clinically documented everything experienced today. Other Gelmin must know what humans were really like under the surface. It began dictating private notes to send to Gelmin authorities back home. No filtered propaganda accounts. This would be the unvarnished, disturbing truth of this baffling species. Perhaps the Federation had acted prematurely inducting such a young, barely disciplined race. Yet Xylovia sensed potential too. Was all this intensity and contradiction the turmoil preceding some metamorphosis into greatness? It did not know. But the ambassador knew its mission here would never be dull, with humans constantly surpassing all expectations for ill and good.